Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah Lipkowitz and I am a real estate agent here in Maryland. I specialize in both residential and equestrian properties, and today I want to talk about the pros and cons of moving to Maryland. I have lived in the Midwest and I've lived in the South, and I ultimately moved back to Maryland a few years ago largely because of the accessibility. We're near two major cities, Baltimore and DC, and we'll talk about DC probably a few times in this video because it is a pretty big part of our culture here in Maryland since so many of us work in the district. And you know, we have our choice of airports. You've got BWI in Baltimore as an international airport. We've got an even bigger international airport in Northern Virginia that a lot of us fly out of. A lot of us will fly out of, you know, the regional DC airport. And then we've got trains, and, you know, so a day trip to New York or Philly is really doable. And public transportation in and around Baltimore and DC is pretty great. And, you know, I just found that the accessibility of this area made it really, really appealing. I want to talk about Maryland being dubbed America in miniature, which is another element of accessibility, really. We have lakes, we have mountains, we have ocean, we have city, we have country. You know, I think we have somewhere north of 7,000 miles of shoreline. So even if you can't live on the ocean because you want to live closer to the district, you know, there's plenty of opportunities for you to be on the water or to, you know, go hiking in the mountains or, you know, whatever you prefer. I know a lot of Midwesterners love their lakes. Deep Creek is very popular here. You know, I've just found that we have a little bit of everything here, which is really nice. So next I want to talk about the cuisine. We are a pretty diverse little state, so we definitely have any kind of international cuisine you want to find. You're going to be able to find it here, but we also have our local favorites. Blue crab is probably the first thing that comes to mind. Crab everything in Maryland, but if you're not a huge fan of crab, seafood in general is pretty popular here. We have pretty good oysters and rockfish, which is striped bass elsewhere. But we also have, you know, our own seasoning, Old Bay. I know people in Europe who request that their family here send them packages of Old Bay. It's like celery salt and paprika, and it goes on everything. And then, you know, I think our state dessert is a Smith Island cake, which is like a 8 to 12 layer yellow cake with fudge icing. But I think the real star here is burger cookies, and you can find them probably most grocery stores across the state carry them now, but they're like cake cookies with a pretty hefty layer of fudge over the top. They're pretty amazing. So, you know, we are proud of our local cuisine, and, you know, we wouldn't trade it, but I know not everybody is into seafood. So, you know, I think there's a little bit of everything here if you are willing to look for it. Education is another big draw to Maryland. I know my parents moved us here from New York because they lived in the city and they felt that we could get a better public education here at the time. And so Maryland's home to some of the best public and private school systems in the country. And we also have fairly accessible higher education as well. I mean, we're probably most known for the University of Maryland and Johns Hopkins, which are actually also both home to some of the top hospitals in the country and the world, respectively. You know, any place that you're going to move to in the state, whether you're on the shore or you're up in the mountains or you are near the district, you're going to be able to find higher education and a campus where you can study. So that's a pretty big draw for a lot of people. In terms of jobs, this is where Northern Virginia and the district come into play because a lot of Marylanders commute. A lot of us live here and we commute to Northern Virginia or we commute to DC. But in general, in Maryland and the surrounding areas, the DC metropolitan area, or the DMV as we often call it, the job market is pretty excellent. And on average, we have higher wages. I think the individual wages average about $6,500 higher here than they do in the rest of the country. So now let's move on to the cons because we have to. I love my little state, but I definitely recognize that there are a few things that people consider drawbacks. First, let's start with the traffic, because that's a pretty obvious one. The traffic in and around the district and Baltimore, it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad really around any major metropolitan area, but it's pretty bananas here. So, you know, if you can use public transportation, or you could buy strategically if you're planning on buying a house here, you know, I would aim for something that is going to afford you a reverse commute, because it'll be a lifesaver. Unless you really like your private time in the car. I mean, I spend a lot of time in my car. I think I've gone through about 50 audiobooks in the last 12 months. So, you know, if you're into that alone time, I guess that'd be nice for you. But for most people, traffic really is a drawback, and you're going to want to be aware of it before you move here. So the next big one, when I've put this question to the masses, what do you like, what don't you like about Maryland? Overwhelmingly, people gave me positive responses, but this was one of the biggest drawbacks of living in the state, is the cost of living in Maryland. So Maryland is not the cheapest state to live in. In fact, I think we're 9th most expensive. I have to check on that. So the last drawback I want to talk about is allergy season. The allergy season here does tend to be pretty defined, which is great, but I don't know anyone who doesn't suffer from allergies. And I think Baltimore ranks as number 71 on the list of most challenging places to live with allergies. So I don't want to know what it's like to be ranked any higher than that, but you know, that's something to know. If you are an allergy sufferer, you are going to struggle in the springtime here, just like the rest of us. There are two things that I couldn't quite rank as either a pro or a con, because it really just depends what your feelings are, and so I've just labeled them as miscellaneous. The first is politics. Now, politics are really hard to get away from here because we are so close to the district. I'm not going to talk about being a blue state, you know, that's, you can do your own research on that, but in terms of getting away from politics, you know, that's really tough. So if that's not your scene, it can be a little bit stressful living here, but on the other hand, a lot of Marylanders are employed by their government, so that's really their wheelhouse. So, you know, it really just depends how you feel about it. There are, I think, Google Chrome plugins where you can block political ads and posts from showing up on your browser and your social media, so that you might be interested in that if you need a little bit of an escape. Lastly, I want to talk about the weather. So again, this is something that could either be great or not so great. It kind of depends on what you like. A lot of people count the weather here as a pro because we have all 4 seasons, which a lot of people like, and we have a pretty mild winter. However, if you really want lots of snow, or you do not like heat and humidity, you probably won't be the happiest with the weather here, because we don't tend to have more than 1 snowstorm every couple of years, and the summers here are brutal. So if you're like me and you love heat and humidity, you'll do great. But you know, if that's something that you don't particularly like, then you will feel the weather is a drawback of living here. Thank you for watching. Be sure to visit my website at www.sarahlekowitz.com to search properties and follow my blog.